Now that you know how to solve for quadratics, we need to talk about some vocabulary. See, what happens is it's really special for us when you have points on the x-axis. And you'll understand that after a while, but what we're looking at is the vocabulary for these points. Now, we call these a couple things. We call them x-intercepts. We call them zeros. Now, I'll explain in a second why they're called zeros. And we call them roots. Now, you need to be comfortable with all three of those terms: x-intercepts, zeros, and roots. Because I'll use all three, the book might use all three, and you need to know exactly what I'm talking about. And so let's talk about why they're called zeros. If you look at each and every point, the x value is something. I don't know what the x value is, but what is the y value? If you look at it, the y value is 0. And then on this one, the x value is something and the y value is 0. And on this one, the x value is something and the y value is 0. Same thing over here. The x value is something, the y value is 0. The x value is something, the y value is 0. And so no matter what, y equals 0 when you're talking about an x-intercept or a zero or a root. Y equals 0. And this is a really big deal. So if a problem is telling you to find the zeros of y equals x squared minus x minus 6, they're telling you to find the zeros. And so what you're doing is you're looking at this as, I'm finding the zeros, and the zeros are on the x-intercept, on the x-axis, and when I'm on the x-axis, y equals 0. So I got to rewrite this: 0 equals x squared minus x minus 6. And now I can solve it. So I can box it out. And I can say, all right, I've got x squared, I've got minus 6, I've got x and x. So then minus 6 is going to be 3 and 2. I get 2x and 3x. I want a negative x in the middle, so that's going to be a minus 3x. So then the top needs to be x minus 3. So now I can say that equals 0 equals x minus 3 times x plus 2. And just like our stuff from the day before, we take those and set them equal to 0 and solve. So x equals 3 and x equals negative 2. And those are my zeros, which means if I was to graph this parabola, if I was to graph it, it would cross the x-axis at 3 and it would cross at negative 2. That's how it would cross. It's a positive x squared, so it would be open up. So the parabola looks something like this if I was just to sketch it because of the zeros. So the zeros are 3 and negative 2. One more example. Let's say I want to find the zeros of y equals 3x squared plus 14x minus 5. Then what I'm going to do, once again, I'm finding the zeros, so I'm going to plug in 0 for y. So I get 0 equals 3x squared plus 14x minus 5. And now I want to box it out. So I box it out. I get 3x squared here, minus 5 here, 3x and x. And let's see, negative 5. I want the 5 times 3, so I'll put a 5 there and a 1 there. So this gives me 15x, this gives me 1x. I want 1 to be negative. So I get 3x minus 1 for one of my bubbles, x plus 5 for the other bubble, and set each one equal to 0 and solve, and we're done. So let's see here, we get x equals 1/3 and x equals negative 5. And so those are the zeros. Again, if I was to graph it, it would cross the x-axis at 1/3 and at negative 5.